reproductive rights in general are very much under threat by Christian nationalists at all levels of government.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bettianne Hedges, the Executive Director of Humanist Canada. And welcome. As always, this recording will be available after this event on all of our various platforms, including our new podcast. We are recording live on June 23rd, 2024. I would like to begin by acknowledging during Canada's Indigenous History Month, the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands on which we are guests. I also want to note that the word Canada is the Indigenous word for village or community, and we gather here today as a community of humanists. Canada and the United States are possibly the world's two most similar countries. We speak the same language, eat the same foods, work in the same sorts of jobs, celebrate most of the holidays, and often consume much of the same media. But the gap between our two countries is growing. Canadians are looking south and asking, what's going on? In the last few years, American politics has become one of our favorite sports. And we see religion referenced more often in these public conversations, while Christian nationalism has imposed itself into every conversation. And so that is why we are fortunate here today to have as our guest someone who can help us gain a better perspective, and that perspective through that unique humanist lens that we all share. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Nicole Carr, Interim Executive Director of the American Humanist Association, Editor of the Humanist Magazine, and Senior Editor of the Humanist.com, which many of us follow. And as you know, she hosted the Humanist International Freedom of Thought report launch. Humanist Canada was involved in that report. Nicole is joining us from Washington, D.C., and she works in that great blue building with the happy humanist on the side. Nicole and I had talked about approaching this conversation with a SWOT format: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. But let's shake up the letters. Let's begin with your strength, the organization you lead. But then let's look at threats. That gives us opportunity as a way to close out today and to look forward in a positive way.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I became the interim executive director in March of this year, while we search for I should say March of last year, as we sort of go through a prolonged analysis of the organization and a search for a new executive director. So we are deep in the process of finding our permanent executive director, and we hope to be able to have an announcement to make next couple of weeks.
Okay, so Humanist Canada is celebrating 55 years. How long is AHA been around?
We've been around since 1941. So it's 83 years this year.
So let's talk about your public messaging to start. You've been very involved in the outward facing, the external messaging of the American Humanist Association. I really like your website, that Journey to Humanist project. That's great, that public sharing of anyone's personal journey. If you get an opportunity, have a look at that. That interactive use of technology is brilliant. Many of us share the haikus on your site also. One that caught my eye this morning by Caitlin Kelly: humanity breathes when logic meets compassion, humanity sees. I like that. So how are you measuring your success in your messaging?
So that's a very good question. We certainly, part of it is according to what feedback we get on projects like Journeys to Humanism. That is, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, that is a project where we solicit the stories from members of our audience about how they made their way to humanism. And we've gotten a lot of really wonderful tales from people about the variety of ways that people find humanism and find the AHA. So the submissions to that project itself are a way we measure our public message. And also by, in participation with things like our conference and our webinars and our public programs.
So the Humanist, that comes out on a regular basis. That's very good. Many of us really, use that as a way of interpreting indeed what is going on in the States and measuring some of the actions we've seen recently. So let's get right into the threats. We are founded by Henry Morgentaler. Now, I don't know if you know that, a doctor who performed abortions and suffered violence due to his role. I was listening to one of your videos this morning and was just shocked by the violence that you're seeing against those involved in providing abortions, providing abortion information. You actually had the statistics. So are you monitoring that? Are you seeing a continued uprise? Is it leveling out? And why is it happening?
Are you talking about violence against it, like at clinics?
Yeah, abortion practitioners, and with the fall of Roe versus Wade, how indeed that impacted your messaging in general, how you had to change the messaging, and as your organization, have you been targeted for anything specifically due to that, being part of that dialogue?
Right. So we haven't the violence on around reproductive health hasn't lately been at clinics where women are actually getting abortions. It's been mostly in the legislatures when in 2022, after the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, which is what protected the right to abortion. We've just seen about half the states now have some kind of restrictive abortion laws, some of them so restrictive that they essentially ban abortion. And what's happening is that people who need abortions are not able to get them. People whose lives are in danger, women whose lives are in danger, have to either travel great distances or are simply not able to get the abortions that they need. And and now we're seeing the legislatures reach even further to restrict, to start trying to restrict contraception and even other kinds of reproductive services like in vitro fertilization. We've seen some courts attack the sort of very foundations that permit in vitro fertilization. So there's the reproductive rights in general are very much under threat by Christian nationalists at all levels of government, from state to federal. And we're even seeing some local jurisdictions get into the act. In Texas, for instance, there have been some local jurisdictions that made rules about the use of highways to travel to get an abortion. So the situation is really very serious, and there have certainly been moves to the way to if the courts that have protected the right to an abortion previously are no longer going to protect it, then the only way to do that would be to make a federal law, for Congress to pass a law that would protect abortion and other reproductive rights nationally. But with the divide in our Congress right now, that just isn't going to happen, despite the fact that several bills to do that have been introduced. They've been blocked.
So does this surprise you? And in a nutshell, why do you believe this is all being targeted? Like, what is it about the religious approach, the religious life view that has made this become such a political, so important to them, that the lengths they're going?
What we're seeing now is the fruition of a very long campaign on the part of Christian nationalists and the far right to control reproductive health. And the fact of the matter is that it's the effort is to control women and to decide what the role of people who give birth in this country can be. And it started a long time ago, and they have the far right has slowly been working to put things in place so that they can be victorious. The Trump administration was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices who paid lip service to the fact that Roe v. Wade was settled law and was precedent that could not be attacked. And yet they came onto the court with every intention of overturning it. And that's what happened. I think what we're seeing is sort of, as fewer and fewer people in the United States, and I'm sure this is true in Canada as well, as fewer and fewer people are religious, Christian evangelicals in our country are fighting to hold on to their power. And they have, over many years, and with organizations like the Heritage Foundation in their corner, have put in place infrastructure that allows them to elect politicians who are, in fairness, very out of step with the interests and desires of the American citizenry. Every poll shows that reproductive rights are very powerful, and in fact, in places that have gone to extremes to attack it, we have seen some pushback in terms of ballot measures put on the ballot that would protect abortion, and it is galvanizing a certain some segments of the population, but at this point it's sort of an uphill battle.
So if indeed they're successful and they do elect a president clearly unsuitable for the role, Project 2025 comes in, supported by the Heritage Foundation, actively opposing your Establishment Clause in the Constitution, the clause that separates church and state. That will be a major constitutional movement change that will take generations to get back. Would you agree?
Yes.
What the risk would be here? Yeah. So what does it feel like on the ground? That's what I want to ask. What does it feel like there? Here we have the media, we have a few American friends, but are you measuring across the country, and what does it feel like? Does it feel like the ground is literally falling out from under you? How is it feeling right now?
Yeah, so I mean, I try not to be alarmist, but yes, it feels like the ground is falling out from under us. We are literally fighting to protect or regain rights that we thought were settled decades ago. There are And it's very scary. But you mentioned Project 2025. For those of you who aren't familiar, it is a plan that, and you can Google Project 20. Well, you don't have to Google it. It's project2025.org. And they just lay it out. They are not the far right. The Christian nationalists are not keeping secrets. They are telling us exactly what they will do if they win elections in November. And it is nothing less than dismantling the government as we know it and installing an authoritarian one. They need to, literally replace government workers with people who are loyal to the Christian nationalist agenda, and they need to change how schools function, how education functions in this country. They very clearly are saying that they will attack organizations that try to oppose them by using tax and regulatory laws. So, I mean, the situation is very scary. And we've seen some of it already. I mean, Louisiana, I mentioned education. Louisiana passed a law last week that requires the Ten Commandments, a very specific translation, the version of the Ten Commandments, to be posted in every public school in the state. Now, legal cases have already been brought against it by the American Civil Liberties Union, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. But there is an uphill battle, and we don't know what the Supreme Court will do if it gets to them. So,
are you planning a Vote Secular campaign, and what does that look like? How are you pushing back against that?
Yeah, so there are a few things we're doing. First, we're certainly trying to educate our members so that we make sure that this is not, sort of flying under the radar, that everybody knows what the stakes are. There is the Secular Coalition for America, of which we are a member, along with lots of other humanist and atheist organizations in this country, has a secular votes program, which we participate in. We regularly remind our, if you read our weekly newsletter, thehumanist.com, my staff note is about the importance of voting, and we have run and encouraged our chapters to run both registration campaigns and get out the vote campaigns. Now, I think the laws in Canada are similar. As a nonprofit organization, we cannot get involved in specific elections. In other words, we can't advocate for specific candidates or against specific candidates, but we can advocate on the issues, and we can advocate for voting in general, and we very much do that at every opportunity. One reason to be hopeful is that one of our representatives from the House of Representatives, Jared Huffman, who is one of the co-founders of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, which the AHA helped to found in the House. He and Representative Jamie Raskin, who's the other co-founder of the caucus, a couple of weeks ago started a Project 2025 task force, which is designed to bring together members of Congress to do what they can before the election to create safeguards that would prevent the dismantling of the functions of government that the Project 2025 threatens, and also would work to set up some safeguards going forward, since we don't know what the elections will bring us. Those are the education, getting out the vote, and working with the congressional task force are the measures we're taking right now.
And as you can see in the chat, we are feeling some of that here also in our own political system. And like you, we can't point to candidates, but again, we are feeling and some religious movement behind that, but also the targeting of queer and trans people, abortion rights, and the same subject matters, the same dialogue, the same approach, but it's just a little quieter here, which indeed may make it a bit more scary, comparing things to be afraid of, but because we're just not used to seeing it. We're just not used to seeing it and identifying it. And I think an important role for all of us here to point out things when we do see them, because that's a scary road ahead of all of us. We've seen it around the world.
Further up in the chat, somebody mentioned Jerry Falwell's moral majority in the 70s. There were, Anita Bryant, and we have, there's this quote that we love to use in the United States. You've probably heard it, but the arc of justice is long. I mean, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. What we're finding is that is in fact only true if you make it bend towards justice. When, Jerry Falwell was a feature in the 70s, it was very much fringe, and we didn't, our side tended to think that it wasn't, that it was just a bunch of sort of bizarre people on the edges, and that it wasn't a real threat. And the fact of the matter is, those are the people that were responsible for the beginnings of where we are today. So if you're seeing the beginnings of it now, where you are, pay attention, because that's what can metastasize into a real threat.
Right. Any tangible advice? Anything that we should be doing specifically? Anything you wished you would have done earlier as an organization?
Yeah, I think, and it's not that we ignored them at the time, but I don't think we took them as seriously as we should have. I think we should have fought harder then, and we did, and paid more attention to the organization that was going on quietly in the background.
One of the thoughts in Canada is that the pandemic accelerated all this here, but which is kind of counterintuitive, because when you're in it and we're having conversations about individual rights, you think it would have moved it the other way, but it really did not. Did you experience similar there?
I think there were certainly factions that the pandemic. There were issues that the pandemic that they used the pandemic to organize around. The anti-vax movement, the anti-mask movement, the insistence that government shouldn't be allowed to require churches to close along with other businesses. And I do think those gave them some things to rally around. But the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, I hope I won't say that, because that would be advocating. The Trump administration, came before the pandemic. So this was certainly, part of what was going on in the United States before the pandemic. And even during the pandemic, there were some, we had the riots that happened after George Floyd was I'm sorry, the protest that happened after George Floyd was killed, and then the sort of police riots that came in reaction to that, and then, you know, the insurrection when they literally attacked the Capitol. Some of that was probably exacerbated by the sort of frustrations around the pandemic. It's hard to know what would have happened if not for the pandemic.
Right. What's going on in the courts right now that you're bracing for? What are you watching for?
So the Supreme Court is bringing its current session to a close, and typically they finish at the end of June. On rare occasions, they release decisions in July. But we're waiting for some important decisions to be announced. One is on whether or not Trump has immunity from prosecution as a former president. That's obviously crucial. Another is there's another abortion decision that's going to be handed down that has to do with created around emergency abortion. And there's another very important, there's a very important gun control case still to come, and there's a case called Loper, which is it's a very complicated issue, but it essentially boils down to whether a decision about whether or not agencies of government like the Food and Drug Administration or even the Justice Department has the ability to make certain kinds of regulations, and it in itself could threaten the regulatory ability of the government. So those are the things we're waiting for now. But next year, there's all sorts of scary stuff coming, not the least of which will be a challenge undoubtedly to the 10 Commandments law in Louisiana. I think there were a couple of questions.
Marty, do you want to go ahead? We're struggling with our sound here.
Thanks, Bettianne. Thanks, Nicole, for being with us. I've been a longtime member of both these organizations as a humanist chaplain and been to your conferences and had great chats with Royce Breckhart before you became the executive director. I have a question about what you think the Free Thought Caucus and us humanists politically that still can vote in the United States. I'm a dual citizen. Do you think that if Biden is reelected, that there'll be an emphasis to expand the Supreme Court to try to balance out this 6-3 conservative bias that the court has, as opposed to other Democrats who have wanted to expose some of the ethical violations of the Supreme Court justices? Are they aiming more towards expanding the court and adding new justices, or more towards exposing the some of the ethical compromises and lack of no conflict of interest amongst Alioto and Thomas and some of the other Supreme Court justices?
Right. So we believe strongly that we need to do both of those things. And there are several bills that are, for those of you who aren't aware, the Supreme Court is the only level of judiciary that does not have a code of ethics that with penalties and rules that they have to follow. The justices are absolutely responsible for policing themselves. And that's not working very well. And there have been numerous scandals where the justices have taken money and gifts and things from donors who have very pronounced political viewpoints and also actual business in front of the court. So we support SCIRT, which is the Supreme Court Ethics Recusal and Transparency Act, which would create a code of ethics. We support the Judiciary Act, which would create a series of penalties, and we also support expanding the court. I will say, unless there is a progressive majority in both houses, I think it will be hard, of course, to pass anything in the next administration. But I do think that the ethics rules have a better chance of passing than expansion of the court. Although expansion of the court is the only way to dilute the majority and the plan we support would expand the court to 12, which is the number of judicial districts there are in the country.
Craig's from Ottawa.
Your country's in the middle of a civil war. There's no question about that, and has been for several decades. And even if Biden gets elected in January, the Trump people and the far right are not going to go away at all, and all hell may break loose come next January the 20th, one way or the other. One of the things that, when you look at the far right or the Christian evangelical people, they're reasonable people, and they're reasoning from their assumptions about God and so forth, and they're logically following that. And that makes sense. But what they're doing in addition, which I don't think humanists as a group do, is they create a sense of passion that propels them to follow their logic in their activities. And the closest I can think about it in terms of humanism is what we saw during the Vietnam War and the civil rights movement, but there was a large religious element associated with that, especially the civil rights because of Martin Luther King. My question to you is, how do we get passion into humanists, organizations, individuals to be part of our rational thinking? Because I think that's where the right-wing evangelicals are one up on us. They have passion.
Mm-hmm.
And which motivates them to do this. And we tend to think, you know what, logic is the key thing, but I don't think it is. Any comment?
Well, I will say that I feel pretty passionately about the importance of protecting democracy.
Oh, I appreciate that. That wasn't meant to be personal.
No, I understand. What I'm saying is, I think that needs to be the focus. And I hope that's what we try to do when we talk to people about, the importance of understanding what Project 2025 would do and how important it is to fight it and why it's important to vote. I think one of the problems we're facing right now is that people in the United States are a certain segment of the population has decided that they don't much like Biden. They may not like Trump, so they're just gonna stay home. And we're fighting that sort of apathy. If we could get everybody that thinks Trump is a problem to actually vote, we would probably be okay. So we do have to get those people excited about something, and I think that the idea of protecting democracy is the thing we need to rally around. All of our, we can't get, none of our values will be supported in an authoritarian government. That's all there is to it. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that doesn't happen.
What's scary for me is not Trump. It's rather the approximately close to 50% of Americans who currently support him after so many years.
I don't disagree with it.
That is absolutely mind-boggling, and that's not going away because his support is not only with evangelical people, but rich people as well who do like lower taxation. And I just see an ongoing for the next several decades, a big fight in your country.
Yeah.
And as a Canadian, what would you say, advise us as Canadians, is what we should do to offset the change in relationship that we will be having with your country in the future?
Wow, that's a good question. Hold our government accountable, no matter who it is. It's important. I think that our friends and allies, be a counterforce as well.
I have one other comment, if I may. I suggested to Barack Obama, political advisor, Hasselrod, I suggested to him that President Biden should, with all due respect to Kamala Harris, should choose Barack Obama as his vice president running mate. And then Mr. Biden should, a year or two later, resign, and then Obama could be the president for a couple of years, because your Constitution says he can't be elected more than twice. Doesn't say there he can't serve as president more than twice. And that might cause people concern about their vice president willing to vote for Biden again. I pass that on for what it's worth, but I realize you're not a political organization.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe
that would certainly be interesting. I think it's too late to do that, but.
Nicole, do you want to look at Barbara's question in the chat? How do you respond to criticism that humanists are too woke? That's something we get here also. Any thoughts on that?
So, I don't love the term woke. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I don't have a good definition for it. So, to me, the criticism of being woke is what you level against somebody because you disagree with them. I'm not particularly sure what it means. I will say that the AHA does, our view is that a large part of our mission it includes support of social justice issues. What part of humanism is believing that this world is all we have, and that we are therefore we should have an obligation to make it the best place for other humans to live in, along with ourselves. And I firmly believe that. And to me, that translates into caring about things like certainly reproductive health, which we've talked a lot about, but also rights for full rights for LGBTQ people. It translates into caring about racial equity. It translates into caring about climate justice. And, all those issues do get tagged with as being woke. So, I mean, I guess I think the term, it's my understanding that the term started as a way to say that we were awake to the problems in our society and were serious about trying to fix them, to heal them. So I guess to that extent, I do think humanists are, to use a somewhat religious term, are called to be woke.
I like that. So I think one of the things that we came out today, and just in order to transition towards opportunities in this discussion, how is it feeling on the ground? Do you feel there are a critical mass of Americans that really do feel that this movement is wrong? We know that secularism, the nuns, however you want to call it, those numbers are, when they are being counted, we know the numbers are going up. How is that going to look at the ballot box? And do you feel that there's enough to push this back this time?
It is without question true, obviously, according to all surveys and polls, that the number of people who don't identify with with an organized religion is growing. And that is obviously very much to our benefit and creates a large opportunity for us. I do just want to complicate that a little by saying that many of those people who don't identify with organized religion do consider themselves believers and would not consider themselves humanists. They just aren't interested in, sort of the organized religion. But I do think it provides an opportunity for us to reach out to those people, and in some cases, in sort of, for lack of a better word, an interfaith way, to work with the people whose values are the same as humanist values. And Betty, before the meeting, you and I were talking about the 10 Commitments a little, to sort of look at the people who agree with us on those 10 commitments, like compassion and empathy, critical thinking, reason, etc., and to work together with them to accomplish our common aims. I think that's a huge opportunity for us and the people in the humanist community as a whole, and I hope we find ways to take advantage of it. We just have to. The challenge in the opportunity is to figure out how to get those people activated and participating in a way that moves things forward.
So in terms of opportunities, what else are you excited about right now?
I'm excited about our many relationships with the other secular organizations, both in the United States and Canada. I think there's tremendous opportunity for us all to work together to move things forward. I am excited from the point of view of the AHA as an organization. I'm excited about the opportunities that bringing on a new executive director is going to bring us, the opportunities to reach out to new audiences, and the opportunities to sort of reinvigorate our existing audience base. And we have one of the plus side of the very scary political climate right now is that we have started to see upticks in membership. We did see that in the first Trump administration, and as the Christian nationalist movement gains speed, we are seeing that again. So I think that is a really encouraging sign that people are paying attention, and that they want to try to help us do something about it.
So I just want to say, Craig commented about the 10 Commandments in Louisiana and people posting the 10 Commitments. And if you're following any, secular thinkers, any of that on social media, it's just gone crazy doing that. So people have had a lot of fun trying to push back on that one. Marty, go ahead. Question?
It's sort of a roundabout question, but it's a comment, having been involved in these humanist movements now for quite a few years, and now as a humanist chaplain working in a university. One of the issues that we have up here, and I think I've spoken maybe with you, Bettianne, about this, but certainly in some of our other humanist groups, and that is, a humanist chaplain in a university, people look at my badge and they don't know what the hell I am. First of all, they don't know what a chaplain is, and they sure as hell don't know what a humanist is. So one of the areas that I have, even when I was on the board of BCHA up here, I feel like it is an area that we come together more passionately, the separation of church and state, because we are afraid of kind of being suppressed and all these legal things. But my sense is that if we want to attract nuns and the non-affiliated, which may be 30-40% up here in Canada, we're a very secular country compared to the United States, we need to do a much improved job in public relations. We need to get out there and let young people know that we exist and that we actually are very involved in various things that I think they would be very interested in. And my sense is that we spend the majority of our time and energy trying to make sure that we suppress white racism and the white nationalist movement. The separation of church and state has become almost an obsession because you can raise money around it. But young people that I meet at the university are interested in other issues, and they don't even know who we are as humanists. So if we want to attract these people, they have to know about us. What do you do in the United States to let the word get out that you are there as an alternative to the religious belonging?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So promoting humanism, the awareness of humanism, is a big part of our mission, and that's part of what we try to do with our publications. I mean, the publications exist to get the word out about humanism to a larger audience. The publications have to have content, and the content does sometimes tend to be about separation of church and state issues, but we do cover other issues in the talk about what being a humanist is in those publications as well. We're also doing things like you mentioned, young people. There's a really interesting program coming up that is being run by we're a sponsor. The main hosts are Tufts University, the Humanist Chaplaincy there, and Atheists United from California. They're coming together to do a program for young humanists specifically. So we're really excited about that. And we do a lot of our education programs are attempts to reach out to audiences. Like we have one coming up on food insecurity that do work to reach out to audiences that may not be humanist, to explain what humanism is and get the word out more.
Alan's in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Are you experiencing threats? Are your members experiencing threats?
So at the moment, we have not had threats lodged against us at the national. But Humanist International certainly has, of which we are a member. The House Foreign Affairs Committee has gone after Humanist International because they got a grant from the State Department to do projects in two projects in South Asia that were designed to teach people how to protect humanists from in countries where blasphemy and apostasy are punishable offenses. And the House Un-American, that's a Freudian slip. I was about to say the House Un-American Activities Committee. The House Foreign Affairs Committee has come after the State Department and Humanist International for that grant. And they recently, Craig Smith, who is on that committee, a Christian nationalist on that committee, has proposed a bill that would prohibit the State Department from creating any more grant programs that protect atheists specifically. So, I mean, to that extent, yes, we have, and he has mentioned, because the Humanist International is also an American organization, and they use the AHA's address as their American address. Chris Smith has attacked us on those issues as well, even though we had nothing to do with the grant program. So, and we are, you know, Project 2025 specifically says that they intend to come after organizations like the AHA on any precept they can come up with. So we are, you know, trying to make sure all our regulatory and IRS T's are crossed and I's are dotted, so that, you know, we present as small a target as possible, but we do expect them to come after us, and we have to be ready for that and willing to do what we need to do despite it.
So Rosa has a question, and I'm trying to think of how to frame this in a way that you can answer. Was there a candidate, like, has there been any candidate that has been more sympathetic to issues that are more important to the AHA and to us, that hasn't got traction, that may have been a better option than those currently running?
So there's certainly, Biden has not, as president, has not been unfriendly to non-theists. He has, the administration has tried to make us part of faith-based groups that are convened and gather. As far as an alternative to the two candidates, you know, the United States is, for better or for worse, a two-party system, and there are no viable candidates, especially at the presidential level, outside the Democratic and Republican parties. So we have I will put on my hat as interim executive director of the Center for Free Thought Equality now, which is our adjunct that can do lobbying and advocacy. They are working to create more pipelines for candidates like that. For instance, helping to set up and working with the Association of Secular Elected Officials, which is now mostly local electeds, but you know, hoping to see that change, and also trying to set up secular caucuses in the state that are the sort of state level equivalents of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole. This has been informative. I can't say it's been comforting, but it has certainly been informative. And please know you have a group of cheerleaders in Canada, Humanist Canada, our affiliates, our chapters, and all of us that are watching carefully and trying to support and the work you do, and influencing at every opportunity anyone we might know who has a voice in the United States. So thank you very, very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
We've had a good representation across Canada today. Thank you.